Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Asad Lalji. Welcome to another exciting live session of Avid Online. For those who are joining us for the first time, a special warm welcome to you. Please refer to the chat section for more information about Avid Learning and the work that we do, and also more information about our wonderful partners for this evening. We've completed almost 7 exciting months of online programming. As many of you know, on April 1st, we introduced our digital further learning campaign, Avid Online. And since then, we've curated and published a mix of live sessions and Avid Online videos. And tonight marks the 130th program so far and counting. We've covered topics and issues from across the breadth of the arts and connected with our ever growing online community with a wide range of local, national, and international speakers, truly bringing the best from around the world to your screens and ensuring that even in these difficult times, we stay true to our mantra that learning never stops. We continue to spread the positivity of the arts to uplift and educate and inspire our community. This brings us to our evening session, 100x VC and Avid Learning proudly present Blogs to Books, Expressions of Entrepreneurship. I'd like to give a warm virtual welcome to our speakers actually. So I think our first speaker is having a little connectivity issues. So bear with us. He will join in, but he is C-suite executive, tech startup mentor, author, blogger, business strategist, Kaustubh Sonalkar. Our second speaker for the evening is corporate lawyer, public speaker, business columnist, and author Ranjeev, who will be in conversation with our moderator for this evening, speaker, trainer, and partner and content director at the Word Jockey Creative Content Studio, Sapna Gupta. For more about this very distinguished panel and their very impressive bios, please refer to the chat section. Their bios have been pasted there. We've also emailed them to you earlier in the evening. These dynamic speakers will straddle and effortlessly adapt their writing, voices, and insights across digital and the print worlds. We'll discuss their successes in writing their first book, writing based on their personal blogs, the future of blogging, and their experiences getting their books published, and the difference in writing for the screen and writing for the page. Please note the session would last 45 minutes, followed by a 15-minute Q&A. Sapna will be taking questions, so please start posting them in the Q&A box throughout the session. Also, guys, we have a fun trivia section towards the end where the authors have generously contributed signed copies of their books. So keep your ears peeled. The questions are very intriguing, interesting, and I'm sure you all will get the answers just right. So just have to post your answers in the Q&A box along with your email address and phone number, and signed copies of their books will be delivered to you. So on that note, thank you for tuning in. Over to you, Sapna. I hope Kaustubh has finally managed to join us. Alternately, we're going to just start the discussion in the interest of time, and Kaustubh will join when he can. Look forward to a fascinating discussion. Thank you very much. Sapna, it's all yours.
Asad, thank you very much for that generous introduction. And Ranjeev, welcome. While we await Kaustubh, we can maybe begin with some nuggets of information from you. So, Ranjeev, what I want to start with today is you're a business leader and you've written a couple of books yourself. And I'm sure you've had a learning trajectory from the first book you wrote up till later ones. But what I've noticed is that business books used to be ramrod straight, instructional, and business like, if you know what I mean. But today what's happened is, while they have retained their educational value, business books have become far more readable. So you yourself have a book named Bullshit bullshit quotient, right? And while it's unspeakable, I suppose it's innately readable. So what do you have to say? In fact, in your promo video to this event, you had mentioned that I write like I speak, and I thought that was very, very fascinating. So tell me, Ranjeev, how do you see business writing having evolved?
I think business writing evolved in the same way I did, making the same mistakes. So, if you'll allow me the self absorption, I will speak about my experience and on the assumption, the untested assumption that what I'm saying is been more generally true than I would really have reason to know. When I wrote my first book, this was back in 2003, and I was, up and coming lawyer. I was 43, 44 years old. And there was tension between the need to share something I thought I'd learned with this need to impress. And somewhere in the back of my mind was this marketing effort that was built into what I was doing. Now, in the fault lines of this mistake, most business books were falling at the time. They were projecting people and trying to be impressive as opposed to communicating well. Because if you want to share knowledge, you must be very accessible.
Absolutely.
But if you want to impress, you must be very formidable. And I fell between the cracks and just became bombastic and unreadable.
Right.
And I learned a bitter lesson. I said, I've written this book. It's got great content, but I'm not getting through. And the reason is that I wasn't clear about the one thing that really matters in the book writing world, which is first, books are about communication. And many authors found out the same thing at the same time, that they were not getting through. And book sales of business books were like, change.
Right.
And so when we got to the second book, social media had just begun to take off. Well, actually, Facebook and so forth. Yeah. And so the culture was changing. And you could afford to have a temper tantrum and it was okay. People would be entertained as opposed to upset. Well, I think I went over the top. So Bullshit Quotient, which I'm actually hoping you will give away a few copies of, is a very good example of fantastic, entertaining content, which is too much in your face. It's a subtle nuance to communicate well without also potentially offending your readers.
True that.
Yeah? So finding that balance takes a certain kind of, should we say, discipline? And I don't think I found it. I don't think business books generally went down that road. Most were not trying to be over the top. They continue to drone, putting you to, sleep. So, but by the time I got to my third one, I realized that when you're selling the world of ideas, it's truly, truly hard to sell ideas. How to do it? And I decided to tell a story. In the story is an embedded idea. They'll like the story, they'll get the idea.
Lovely.
So I wrote about the legal world and what really goes on in law firms and in the courts in the context of how I grew up as a lawyer. And I tried not to focus on myself, but my bewilderment and my slow increasing comprehension of how it works. And this naive lawyer transforms into a cynic. It was a great story. The only problem was there's no heroinoid, the only heroine was my wife, I suppose. And Kareena Kapoor won't do it. There's going to be no movie.
I hope she found a mention in your book, though. Thank you, Ranjeev. So that was delightful. Kaustubh, I'm delighted that you have joined us. I understand you had some starting issues with your internet.
Oh, yes, even now. So I don't ask. It was a crazy time.
Well, lovely to have you here, Kaustubh. So, we were talking about the evolution of business writing, whether it is blogs or books, where earlier business writing used to be really straitjacket. It used to be very business-like and the use of corporate words, etc. But while that made it formidable, as Ranjeev rightly put it, it wasn't very accessible and it wasn't making that connection with writers, with their readers. And Kaustubh, you're a perfect example of first starting with blogs, which are bite-sized pieces of knowledge that you shared with your readers, and you drummed up a huge readership on your blogs before you even considered making a book of it. Am I right?
But it was people believe in writing business books which have a lot of theory and there is a lot of theory into it, and there are diagrams and they just complicate stuff is what I thought. Having gone to a business school myself, that I thought the best way to learn business was to learn from real life and sport. And I also thought it was even cinema to that extent. So when you share experiences with people,
Right.
I think
So
we've lost Kaustubh for a bit, right?
I think so. So, well, he's made his point. I think, using, and I think Ranjeev and Kaustubh both brought that out, saying, how about we use storytelling to make our point? So, the educational value really remains sacrosanct. You do share a lesson, but it is much more relatable and therefore much more memorable if you do it through, Kaustubh mentioned maybe sport, maybe cinema, popular culture. Ranjeev mentioned fictionalizing story, relating this timeline of where I was and where I found myself. So I think that's a new trend, be it in blogs or books, in business writing, and clearly that has connected with your audience. Ranjeev, your first book was on litigation strategy, and you said that when you wrote your books you were trying to impress and possibly focusing less on the communication aspect, on the genuine connection you needed to make with your audience. So tell us a little bit about the lessons you learned writing your first book, because among our audience here today we have people who have more questions than answers when they're writing their first books, and they want to know, there are two crucial points in this. First, you have to get through to the publisher, you have to be able to demonstrate your value, then only you get to reach your readers, right? So what went through your mind when you were writing your first book, and therefore what were your lessons that you wish you knew when you were writing your first book?
I think I forgot to ask myself. I was so starstruck with the beauty of my own brilliance, so to speak, at the time, and young people have to be like that, that I failed to ask myself fundamental questions about writing a book. And this answer may be a little long, and I hope Kaustubh will be patient with me. I never asked myself, why am I writing a book? I mean, clearly, if you're writing it for money, you're crazy, because 7% royalty isn't going to get you there. You can write to project yourself professionally, provided you're young enough to be able to wait for the time it takes to project yourself and get there. I didn't ask myself who I was writing for enough. If I'm writing for the young lawyer and trying to teach him about the law, he doesn't know the high fluted English I was speaking.
Right.
I mean, my vocabulary was way over the top. So the lesson, if any, is be understood or perish. If you're not going to be understood, you can write the best stuff in the world. I mean, it's just gibberish. And what was my message? I thought my message was clear, but if I was asking somebody, if somebody was asking me, how should I write? I would say, look, first, you better have domain expertise. Otherwise, don't write, and then talk at the eye level of the audience. Don't talk over their heads. And
Right.
don't talk below them, because they'll get bored of you in 1 minute. The next lesson probably was that a book is not a snack, it's not a newspaper. You write for longevity. What you say hopefully will still be true 5 years from now. I know timelines have shortened, the world is changing too fast. I understand, I get it. But still, your untested underlying ideological assumption has to be what I write is worth reading a second time.
Right.
Yeah. And the next question is, do you have the expertise to deliver the message that you believe you have? And that's why I say, go out there, go to the mountain, pay your dues. And then when you finish paying your dues and you're good enough, then come back and write a book. So you start with the blog as Kaustubh did.
Right, right.
And then you progress to print media and then you write.
Ranjeev, you've made a couple of excellent points here. So, don't talk above or below your audience. And you rightly said, while writing your first book, we tend to obsess over ourselves and what we know instead of looking at our readership and understanding where in their life cycle they are and what they might like to understand and know from you, right? And about your English, fortunately, we have the Kindle now where you can just tap on a word and figure out what it means. And I think technology has come a long way. And maybe if your first book had come out, a decade later, things would have been different. And so, Kaustubh, help me out here. So, when we say making a real connection with your readership, how did starting with blogs help you come out with a book that was perfectly well received? And I mean, I'm going to say this, that I was browsing through the Kindle when I came across Fetch Your Own Coffee, and I did see that it has been declared a national bestseller on the Kindle by Penguin. So clearly your debut book doing so well, do you attribute it some part to your experience writing blogs and interacting with the comments that you received on them?
I think what I attribute this to is basically it just clicked, and what clicked was I basically believe that if you connect with the audience with the right set of topic, simple English, in terms of to be honest, I don't consider myself to be a writer. So what I believe is that whatever you pen down, you do it passionately, and I guess and that is exactly what Ranjeev just said. Ranjeev was talking about the same thing. Passion is extremely important when you write something. And if you look through my book, these are different topics. These are not connected topics, but they actually have a message at the end of it. And I guess the audience could relate to the topics. They could relate to the incidences. They could relate because there are references to movies, there are references to sports, and I guess and the English is pretty simple, and we've used all the possible Bollywood and cricket doesn't go wrong, and I think that was the mantra which I used for my book at least. So the national bestseller, I think I think it just happened. So
congratulations on that. If it just happened, congratulations. So much. Lovely. So Ranjeev, maybe you and Kaustubh are at different ends of the spectrum, right? So maybe it would have been great if you all had met before you wrote your books. But this is wonderful. Tell me something, Ranjeev. And you've spoken about connecting with the reader. Now, what has the publishing experience been like for you? Because I understand that a lot of the audience today want to know how to make a genuine connection with publishers, how to get them to buy into their passion for the book they have written. And once they do that, what kind of value does the publisher, having much more experience in the field of writing and selling books, what kind of value does the publisher add to the author once the tie-up happens?
I actually never had a problem finding a publisher. I'd look for an appointment, walk in and sell my story. Publishers can be accessible if you can project yourself well when you get there, but they will give you an opportunity.
Right.
A publisher's perspective is driven by their own definition of their business. So my first book was with Macmillan. At the time, they were very textbook oriented.
Mm-hmm.
So when I went to sell a book about legal strategy, they saw it as a textbook. So most of the work they did with it was to try to convert it into a textbook, where what they needed to do was to push me, and I was a first-time author, I was naive, was to push me to make it more accessible to a wider audience. But it was a different time. 2003 is before most people's, before they were achieved self-awareness. Then next I went to Hachette. Hachette worked really hard. They worked really hard. I mean, the matter was handled by the editor herself, and I'm deeply grateful to her. I think where it went right was that it was very entertaining and provocative. So I got great support on the editorial side, but there may have been a fundamental error in the way we conceived of the book.
I see.
Most of these books have sold. I mean, I'm just being desperately self-critical. I mean, I'm not here to tout my virtues. I'm here to talk about young people's examples.
Absolutely. That's
Yeah. And by the time I got to Penguin, I'm most impressed with Penguin. Firstly, the editorial help they gave me was superb. And the way they went about in a structured way to make sure the product came out just hitting the spot. I mean, I can't tell you how impressed I am. But that's a problem. When it comes to marketing, there is no formula. Nobody knows what's going on. There's two things that will sell. It's stuff by celebrities and stuff about celebrities. And celebrities come in two forms. Those who wear dhotis and those who wear, blink. Well, there's the odd business leader too, yeah, but that's the exception. So that will sell. So if you're a celebrity and you walk in, they'll accept your work without asking a question. Then the other categories is Malcolm Gladwell thing, where you feel that once you've read the book, I know the inside stuff. It's an ego kick. I'm better than you because I know the inside stuff. So you write books about inside stuff, it's great. It works. Apart from that, there's nothing. So what do publishers do? They publish 300 books, 400 books in a year. It's like potatoes and tomatoes. And the differentiator between the books themselves, that the book that doesn't, is marketing. And who's going to do that marketing? Anybody doing 400 books can't differentiate you from the next person. So you have to do your own marketing. And if you want the answer to how that is done, you need to get Amish Tripathi on the show.
Lovely. I know a couple of things about what Amish has done, but we'll come to the marketing bit a little later in this conversation. So, Kaustubh, you've written, I understand that Ranjeev has had multiple experiences. I see that the three of your books have been published by three very renowned publishing houses, but all of them different, right? So you've got wide experience in what it is like to work with each of them. But moving on from publishing, Kaustubh, yours is a business book, right? But it is unconventional because it relies very heavily on instances from real life, right? So you have incidents from your own life. There's reference to music. You've often used poetry or couplets. There are some illustrations that I've seen in your book. So it is really multimedia to that extent, and very conducive to, and you have audio books nowadays. So Kaustubh, what do you feel about different formats in which people consume books, and how do you see yourself as an author? How do you see your connection with consumers to that extent?
I believe that today's readership is different. So the reader is far more evolved. They are far more technically savvy, technologically savvy. The reader is today both. You do have the old school hardcover book readers who actually want to really touch and feel the book. There are readers who actually want to go and read it on Kindle, want to go and read it on online. There is a lot of digital readership which is there. So I guess apart from the content, which definitely should connect to your reader, it's also what way is your content being received. So the way I believe the content being received, it has readership across. So your book has to attract that kind of content and that kind of readership. So I think content is the king, irrespective of what kind of book that you do. So while it has been classified a management, a business book, it has got tidbits of everything. So it's got short stories, it's got real life stories, it's got cricket, it's got Bollywood, it's got poetry. But what it actually does is it is connecting with the right audience. It is connecting with the youth of today. It is connecting. It talks about gender issues. So it is connecting with the issues of today. So that is where I think and how that content is presented to the audience is via different formats. And if your book is ready for those formats, I guess it is ready for the audience. And that is exactly what I believe worked in our case. And I believe that is something which every book going forward should think of. Because audiobook today, people don't want to go and maybe reading is, to an extent, is a trait which not many people enjoy. They prefer listening to a book. So how your book will be heard is something. If you've got good short stories, maybe that becomes far more interesting. So audio, your book should be audio ready.
Very interesting. So, Kaustubh, you mean to say that as a writer, you should write keeping in mind that it should be conducive to different formats of translation when it does get eventually published?
I guess so, because if you've got to stay relevant to what your market is.
Right. Ranjeev, so if you had to republish or rewrite one of your, of the three, your favorite book today, would you do anything differently in writing your business book so that it reaches a wider variety of readership?
Well, I am actually rewriting Winning Legal Wars after 17 years of holding my breath,
Oh,
because the content is still good. Nobody else has done anything like it nor improved on it. I am writing it in, again, a conversational style. And I love what Kaustubh says. It should be an audio book written down on a piece of paper.
Lovely.
And the truth is, I myself, I don't read so much anymore. Of course, I'm aging a bit as well. So it's good to watch your eyes, which you spend anyway 10 hours a day on a screen.
Mm-hmm.
So morning walk is the time to do it. And now there are all these text-to-speech readers. So you don't even have to buy an audio book.
Definitely.
So I would write my book as an audio book. Yeah.
Oh, that's
great, Kaustubh. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Ranjeev, something you just said is a question that one of our audience has in mind. We have Hitu Gandhi, who says, how do you overcome a stigma when people say that the thing that you want to write about has already been said or written about before? You mentioned that since nobody has improved on the topic, I'm going to rewrite it now after 17 years. So what does someone like Hitu do who wants to write about a topic that is widely spoken about?
She should stand up and say, rubbish. How many variations are there on Hindi movies? Boy meets girl. One of the two is poor. One of the two is rich. They fall in love. Then there's some screw up somewhere and eventually it all works out. And the villain gets a beating in the bargain. So it isn't about the story. It's about its treatment. The story doesn't change so much.
Right. So let's get, there are so many more questions, but I'm sure the audience has a lot to ask of us. So I'm going to quickly jump to the next section, which is really the business of writing, right? So, business books are purpose driven. I think when you write fiction, etc., there is an element of entertainment that sort of takes precedence, but business books are clearly different. So what would your advice be, and this is something I'd like both Kaustubh and Ranjeev to give their perspectives on, because y'all are such different people, with the only common thing being that y'all are both very successful writers, right? So what is your advice for first time writers on what to expect when you're writing purpose driven business books? Kaustubh?
I think first thing that one should do is be honest with yourself and go and write what you think is there in your mind, rather than you have something in your mind. I believe that's the best story that you have, because once you go ahead and ask 100 people about what you like, what the others like, you're going to mess it up. It's best to write what you think is right and what you're passionate about. Express yourself in the most in the most honest way that you can on a piece of paper, and then leave it to the rest. Yes, there is an audience that you're writing to, because once you connect, that is the audience that you've already got in your mind, because you relate to a particular audience. You don't relate whenever you think of, you relate to a particular set of audience, and I think that's the most critical piece. And you are right, and you know that whatever your thought process matches that bit of audience. You cannot please all. So once you decide to say that this is a spectrum from X to A to Z, and I want everybody to say, wow, what a book, you're not going to get that. You're going to get, but you're going to play on your front foot, and you're going to play at your best, whatever you're great at. So if you know that this is what is my passion, this is what I write best, and this is the audience that I want to connect to, I think that's where you will kill it.
Oh, lovely. Ranjeev, what's your take on that? Writing purpose-driven books. If you're writing a purpose-driven book, what would you keep in mind, or what would you tell first-time authors to keep in mind? Do you also?
Authenticity.
Hmm.
I think authenticity. Trust begets trust. You want a reader to pay attention to you. He's got to believe you're not a bullshit artist. And I worked on that assumption, and I said to myself that I'm writing nonfiction. That means I have to be seen to be not making stuff up.
Right, right.
So I write what is there, or at least as I perceive it, and I try not to create alternate narratives. And all my books have been really about stuff I've experienced, stuff I've seen, and how I concluded based on the data that I possessed at that point in time. And I think if you follow the logic of having integrity in what you write and keeping your subject fairly close to where you think the reality of a purpose-driven, goal is, you'll get it right. Yeah.
So you start with purpose then. So is that how they can start? I mean, if they've got a lot to say, but they don't know what to anchor it on, do they anchor it on what readers want to know now? Do they anchor it on what's the one thing I want to achieve through writing this book? Where would you start?
Each of these, actually, before Kaustubh could join us, there was a short period when I was holding forth.
Lovely.
And I said that there are 4 or 5 questions I failed to ask myself before I wrote Winning Legal Wars.
Right.
And it's the same considerations all over again. Why am I writing? Who am I writing for?
Yeah.
What am I trying to say? What's my purpose? And then you've got to be honorable about it. And you've got to not defraud your audience. I think that in substance is where I'm coming from.
Super. Great starting point. Kaustubh, there is a balance that you've got to strike between disruptive business thinking versus writing from the heart. Now, through this interview that we're having, it's clear that you speak from your heart and therefore write from your heart as well. But what's your take on the balance between disruptive business thinking versus writing from the heart? I mean, ultimately, it has to be actionable, right?
Yeah, it's a difficult one, but there is I think disruptive business thinking is your state of mind, and if at all you think in a particular way, you action in a particular. If at all you believe that you are working, that's your style. I think disruptive thinking is a style, and it's a style, and it's your way of life. Right, and the other way was it's writing is all about what you feel is right, and from your heart, and may not necessarily be real. It could be idealistic, it could be something that you believe is right. But disruptive thinking is what you think on the go and the way that you lead your life every day. Writing can be slightly more creative and imaginative, and more idealistic at that.
So rather than choosing between the two, it's you make your mental makeup is one and the way you action it is the other.
That's correct.
Lovely. Ranjeev, you have spoken a lot about and also spoken about the lesson you've learned from your first book, and said that communication is key. Writing for your audiences, identifying your audiences. You reiterated that when we spoke about the purpose-driven books. So can you give our audience here some tips on how do you start defining your audience when you're writing on a niche subject? So you write on law, right? So you probably have had questions in your mind. What stage of your legal career would you be in if you read my book? So where do you start with audience identification, Ranjeev?
I think age group, and then the business segment. Clearly, I would never write for and I mean this with respect. I don't write for 50-year-olds. They already know everything. They're gods. I write for the 30-year-old. He's hungry. He wants to know. He wants to understand the world. If you noticed on WhatsApp groups, a 50-year-old isn't really reading what the other guy is writing. He's just waiting for the other guy to stop so he can hold forth. So So okay. So it's a 30-year-old. This is a legal subject.
Sure.
Who wants to know? lawyers want to know young lawyers,
Right.
and maybe people who work in law firms want to know, and people who handle legal cases want to know. So you've already got it. You've got your audience down pat. Now you find what their profiles look like. Where are the lawyers to be found? Not in a mufassil town, in a dusty village with many cows on the streets.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be somebody in a metropolitan area who's more plugged in, who thinks reading is important.
Right.
Okay, so he comes from a certain educational background. He has a certain perspective on life and a certain skill with the written word.
Right.
Where is the executive coming from? Very likely he's not the guy who's selling chunnis, in the old bazaar of the local mufassil town.
Right.
He's working for a corporation. So you've identified him. You've got your audience as the easy part, actually, of getting it right. What do they want to know? I've always been kind of ambivalent about that. I know what I have to say. If they're not interested, they wouldn't have bought the book. Why am I trying to write for people who are not interested in what I have to say, in the hope that they might get interested after they read the book that they're never going to buy? So if you see, it's a logical fallacy. So I don't do that very much. I'm clear about my message. Now, I don't know if I've really answered your question, but I will say this, if you'll allow me another minute. Do I have another minute?
Well, just about, yes.
You've got to write the chapter headings and see the flow and see if at the end of the day you have a product that makes sense. So the nuts and bolts of writing is where really the crux of it is.
Very, very actionable advice. Ranjeev, thank you so much. And you've kept it well under a minute. Thank you very much. So, we do have to move on to the next section, but I'm going to quickly touch upon the marketing aspect because that's extremely crucial. Ranjeev, you mentioned that publishers typically come out with 300 to 400 books a year. That sounds about right from all the material that we see published digitally about the industry. And Kaustubh, you yourself have also said that, readers are now not just readers, they're people who like to listen, Ranjeev, while you jog, maybe go for your morning jog, etc. So, there is an expanding market and an extremely high supply now. A lot of people are writing and, they want to have themselves heard. So in that scenario, marketing becomes extremely important. I think Kaustubh and Ranjeev, both your experience has been that the publisher can't be solely dependent upon to market your books because they have too many that they're trying to push off their shelves. So how do you market your books? For instance, you mentioned Amish, Ranjeev. I believe I heard him say in one of his interviews that the best thing to do is he sort of had his first chapter printed out and placed at crossword bookstores for free at the billing counter. So people could just pick up this, it was almost printout sized, right? It's one chapter. And when that got their attention, people tended to buy the book. So now if you have e-readers, you have the Kindle, etc., you can order a sample for free, right? Which allows you to read a chapter or two. If you like it, you make the purchase. But this physical avatar of it was introduced by him. So marketing is superbly important. How would you market this other book now that you're writing it years later, Ranjeev? And the same for Kaustubh. What's your take on marketing?
I'm right now in the process of formulating my thinking. I'm questioning this whole business of asking people to pay for content. Most of the content I'm now reading seems to find itself to me free one way or the other. You can sell one copy and before you know it, somebody send it to 400 of his friends. The second issue was really my objective. If I'm trying to communicate and share knowledge, then why am I trying to make a lousy buck out of it? So my sense is that I would probably not sell this book, but would give it away. Which makes it a download thing. Right. If it is to be given away, and bear in mind that I'm not a young person trying to make his way. Right. Most of my goals are already achieved. So it's in the joy of sharing that I find my meaning.
Lovely. That's beautiful.
So I would give it away as a free download, but that's not something a young author wants to hear. So I'm probably derailing the whole conversation. In the digital world, as opposed to the analog world, it will still be the rules that apply commonly, which is that you promote yourself on social media, give something away free, and let your audience choose if they want to buy the rest of it.
Lovely. Yeah.
and create visibility,
Great.
basically.
So Ranjeev spoke about whetting the appetite of the audience. Kaustubh, what would you like to add to that?
I think content, as I said, content is going to be the key. So and what are you selling? You're selling a thought process. You're selling an idea somewhere.
Right,
Or you're selling a
right,
business book.
right,
Or if you're selling a script, if you're
mhm,
selling a non-fiction or
right,
fiction. So and what typically happens is you if you're selling that, I think that if people get to experience that in tits and bits, they would want to read it more. So why do you think I think I would relate it to a film. When you see a trailer of 1 minute, you would want to see the whole film. So typically when you go on a Netflix, you would like to play the 1 minute trailer and then watch whether you want to really play it. So you need to be really, aware. So my book, for example, it came out as blogs, and then when
absolutely.
people really liked it, they liked the content, and that's how it got sold. Now whenever you look at it, I think you need to be present, and again, be present digitally, be aware of what your audience is, and be hard hitting when it comes to marketing your book. So I would rather go targeted marketing, but not necessarily push my book too hard, unless if the content is bad, you are not going to get any audience, irrespective of how much you market.
Lovely. That was superb. So I think we've got a lot of questions which I'm going to pose to the two of you, so that you can help us with the answers. But as a quick recap, I think what we've all sort of agreed on today is that start with the audience and what you know. And sort of marry the two, so that there's expert advice, there's purpose driven content that you provide, and you provide it to the right people. Marketing is something that the author needs to take charge of. You can't anymore afford to be the creative guy who doesn't know how to sell himself. You have to absolutely be both to become a very, very successful author, and reach the people. You may write the best book, but if it doesn't reach the intended audience, you're only as good as how your book does in the market. So that is the other thing. And start with putting a structure to your book. I think both Ranjeev and Kaustubh mentioned that. Kaustubh very helpfully said that if you're a blogger as well, and now that we have the advantage of the digital medium that induces trial, is a term that we use in marketing products in the manufacturing industry, but I think it's extremely true of books in the digital age, to say that if you induce trial, you write your blog first, get a tremendous response, and translate the same enthusiasm and language and value into your book. That would create a great market for you. And lastly, you have to make sure your content is something that people really want to consume. Ranjeev has spoken about storytelling, and I mean, and there was a point of time when people would speak of law and storytelling as different ends of the spectrum. I mean, even legal language is so strict that you can hardly, it's a mouthful when you read legal disclaimers, right? But I think Ranjeev has changed all of that with his eloquence. So thank you to both of you panelists. And if you could quickly take a couple of questions. We have Priyanka here asking, when you are writing a book on personal experience, is it important to mention real life characters, or does anonymous work when you hide their identities? What would you do? I mean, I suppose there's no right or wrong answer to this, but if either of you would like to answer what you'd do.
I changed names. I tried to create a superficial camouflage, but that's from the desire to make sure that the person has privacy.
Right, right. Absolutely. And I mean, as a lawyer, you'd know the importance of this, and people are really, really getting conscious of how much of their life they want to put out there. And, there is digital downtime, etc. So, Ranjeev, thank you. That's fabulous. So, anonymity is something you'd do to, but you'd keep the authenticity of the situation of the facts, right? And probably make it anonymous. Thank you then. Priyanka, I hope that answers your question. Kaustubh, we have Marissa who's saying, I'm a first time author. My memoir or biography is about my mother, and she was India's first female Olympian and double international, well, two sport athlete. What are your tips for her?
I think go
You
ahead.
being into sports and all that.
It's a brilliant combination. And if you're writing for your mom, I'm definitely sure that she's going to write it with that kind of passion. Would have the right it's very important when you write about a sportsman and a biography kind of a thing. You should know the nitty-gritties of one's life and what that person has gone through. And if some and if and I'm sure the daughter is writing, so she would know everything about your mom. So go ahead and just express yourself. Don't hold anything back. Just make it, just get the authenticity right about and get the facts and figures right, and just express. I think it'll be a brilliant book to read.
Superb. Thank you, Kaustubh. Ranjeev, there's one that says, do you need to get an agent or go directly? I suppose she means to the publisher. So, Ranjeev, with your next, would you go directly or would you go through a literary agent?
I've had agents sell me their services, and the pitch is great.
Hmm.
I personally didn't ever need one. I need, what do agents say? Agents say, you need us to introduce you to the right publisher, and that's certainly a value add. Only if you don't know your publishing industry at all.
Mm-hmm.
And then they say that we can my publishing houses did enough for me, so I don't know what incremental benefit I would have ever got.
Right.
And then the third thing they do is that on the marketing side, they say that they push a lot. The logical fallacy I saw there was that yes, you push a lot, but at the end of the day, who are you pushing? Because the publishing house is not going to do it.
That's
Push
right.
a lot only means remind me to do the job, right? I'll get myself to remind myself.
Right.
So
right.
I didn't use an agent ever, which is not to say you shouldn't. All you really need an agent for is that first interview with a publisher. Once you're past that post, the rest basically you're on your own.
Right. So the value of an agent would be to get you through to a publisher who's interested possibly in the genre you write, but it is not essential, is what Ranjeev is saying. He's done just fine without going directly to publishers as well. So the choice is yours. So Harshad has a question for you, Kaustubh. He says Kaustubh started with a blog. Why did he do that? And when did he think that he could convert to a book? Really fascinating discussion. Kaustubh, any thoughts on that? When was the moment you realized that this would make a great book?
I didn't start thinking that I'm a writer. I just wanted to express my thoughts, and that's how I started writing blogs. And writing a blog was, just to express a thought process or an incident you like in your life, or through a sporting event, or you watch a movie and you write something and you write a takeaway. Now that is when when the readership started increasing, and when that is where the confidence went up. When I was done with about 15, 20, 30 blogs, and we started, then the followership increased. And that's when I thought, yes, it's a good, maybe you write well. Maybe it's a good way of expressing yourself. And
Right.
there were a lot of people who came forward, why not experiment with this and that's where I thought, yes, this is the time. It was about a year back when I thought, yes, it's time for you to come up with a book, a collection of small stories of blogs. And that's how it was. I still didn't think that I was a good writer. I only thought it's expressing your own thoughts is important.
Lovely. Ranjeev, there's a question from Maya Rao who says, why not let a book grow on the reader gradually? Do publishers not allow for that? I suppose this is a comment on the need for marketing, if at all. Any thoughts on that?
Attention spans are really short.
Right.
If you don't begin, this is like the movies. If you don't have a box office weekend to break the bank on the first weekend, there is no second week. So you have to hit the spot right there running. And in the old days, the leisurely world of yacht sailing down the sea, you could have a book with a lot of longevity. Not anymore.
Right. Right. So books have shelf lives just like magazines once used to. And so I think marketing is essential. And let your book grow on the reader would happen only if you get to them in the first place. Great points made by Ranjeev. Taranjeet has an extremely important question. Do how to books really even work anymore? For example, I am an independent filmmaker and want to write about how to make independent films. So do you think people would want a lowdown, point-wise lowdown on a how-to book? Kaustubh, Ranjeev, anyone?
I'm sorry, I have a little internet difficulty. Can you repeat the last sentence?
Right. Taranjeet wants to know, do how-to books even work anymore? I am an independent filmmaker and want to write about how to make independent films. So is it a good idea to go into a complete how-to, like a blow-by-blow how-to book?
How can a how-to be a bad idea? It's not possible for it to be a bad idea. Everybody wants to know
Exactly.
how to make a movie and how to be the president. I mean, go for it.
So how-tos are certainly going to work. I mean, from your minute-long hacks videos that are widely popular on Instagram, Facebook, social, to how-to books, I think people just love learning from others' experiences. So really, just go for it. We have Asha saying, please share your thoughts on self-publishing with a house, say Notion Press. I'm not sure either of our publishers, either of our authors today have experienced, self-publishing, but I'll let them answer this if they have an opinion on it.
Self-publishing, I have met a few. Yeah, those are the guys. And again, the problem with generalization is you're only one step short of defaming someone. Those are the guys who are targeting people who no publisher would ever publish. Right. So if you've gone and found yourself unable to find a publishing house, then you would look at the self-publishing people. So already you've dropped your ambition very substantially. It makes more sense to ask yourself, why are publishing houses not publishing me? And then rework your content so that they do. But if you should be having this deep desire to publish something that publishers don't think will work, yeah, then self-publish. They are helpful. No doubt.
At least you have your story out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, lovely. We have time for only one last question, I'm afraid. So I'll go with Ravindra. A famous, highly decorated soldier has recorded some oral interviews. What is your advice of turning these interviews into biography or history? Kaustubh, you're very much into multilingual, multimedia books. What is your take on this, from oral interviews to books?
Brilliant idea. I think it's not easy. Why not convert these into multiple formats? It's a brilliant idea. If somebody has got that, I think we should go ahead.
Okay, fantastic. So there are a whole lot of more questions, and I'm really sorry that we won't be able to answer all of them if you are to win some prizes today, because we've got 6 books to give away from these two very, very well-renowned authors and very eloquent speakers, as you can see. So I'm going to dive right into this. I'm going to dive right into the contest. So I'm going to ask you some quick trivia questions, and if you could please answer in the chat window, you do stand a chance to win a book. Dhwani, I'd really request you to help me see which answers have come in first. If there are multiple right answers, that would be very helpful. Okay, so here goes the first one. And the authors who are speakers today aren't allowed to answer, of course. The popular book, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari, is written by whom? Oh my God, there are 10 right answers. Way too easy, but whoever got it first is in for a surprise. Number 2, what is the name of Bill Gates's debut book? Very well read audience I see today. It was actually, we call it Bill Gates's book, but it was actually co-authored with 2 others, one of whom was an executive with him at Microsoft. Very interesting story, but that's a thing for another day. The third, what is the highest literary award in India? The India's highest literary award. Jnanpreet, absolutely correct. Well, dubious spellings, but I think you've got it right. I'm going to let the Avid Learning team decide whether, who they're going to award. But I think the first person to answer is spelling was, yeah. Did you know that, along with the Jnanpreet Award, they also give you a little um, idol of Saraswati, who's supposed to be the goddess of knowledge. So, I mean, I think that's a beautiful idea. So, apart from a cash prize and everything else that you have a little Saraswati to remind you of your tremendous experience of writing. Fourth one, who was the first Indian to win the Nobel Prize in Literature? Actually, it was also the first Nobel Prize for India, and it happened to be in literature. Lovely. Again, lots of correct answers. I think our questions are too easy, and we have too well-learned audience. What is the name of the sequel to the popular book Freakonomics? Sequel to Freakonomics. People are furiously Googling away. That's why there are no spontaneous answers. Super Freakonomics. That's right. I see the right answer right there. It is true. It's a book written by one Stephen and one Stephen, economist and a journalist. But lovely. Yes, Super Freakonomics it is, and it's very, very interesting. I recommend you read that right after you read the books you win as a prize here. Which book by Indian economist Raghuram Rajan won the Financial Times and Goldman Sachs Business Book of the Year in 2010? Which book? Of the various books he's written. Fault Lines. Oh my God, you people have, y'all are stunning. Clearly, voracious readers, Kaustubh, Ranjeev, there's hope yet. There are lots of takers for good books when they do hit the market. And in fact, Raghuram Rajan's I Do What I Do, in fact, in case people often write a whole book before they decide on what the title is supposed to be. And I'm sure both Kaustubh and Ranjeev will agree with this. And, Raghuram Rajan, when he was giving an interview, in fact, in his prologue for I Do What I Do, he says that in an interview with a journalist, he was asked something which he didn't know how to answer. So he said, I do what I do. And a lot of classified stuff, right, when you work with the government. And the media sort of picked up on that sentence, I do what I do, and as a reflection of his confidence, and that became the title of his book. So I do hope you'll write the perfect book and you find the absolutely perfect title that fits like a dream. So I don't think we have time for anything else, but Asad, thank you. This was such an entertaining panel, and over to you.
Thank you, Sapna, so much. You moderated, anchored, managed to say so well. For all our wonderfully erudite audiences who've answered those questions so well and multiple times, I'm just going to request you all, if you all can actually on the chat or just email us your address and your phone numbers so that we can actually make sure these books get to you. I'm very jealous because being part of Avid, I can't be part of these contests or even get Kaustubh or Ranjeev's books, but maybe my good graces will get me those books sometime. But thank you all for sharing your process, Kaustubh, Ranjeev. It was fascinating. Sapna, you were fantastic. Kaustubh, congratulations. My internet is unstable apparently right now, but congratulations on your first book, and here's to many more. I'm a big fan of Kaustubh because I know him for a few years now. Thank you to our partners, 100X, VC, Ninad and his team. You have been so generous in collaborating with us. Ninad does some wonderful programs, guys, so you all should tune in for those also. I've had the good fortune of being part of them. Thank you to our participants. You're a very engaged and very accomplished and educated audience. So thank you for being here. Stay tuned for more programs throughout the week at Avid Learning for more next episodes. Next week, we start the 4th edition of Sustainability Now, series with the Chhatrapati Shivaji Vastu Sangrahalaya Museum, the CSMPS, and we have 2 live sessions and a couple of other sessions. So just please stalk us on social media, follow us at Avid Learning, or visit our website at www.avidlearning.in. Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, and remember that learning never stops. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a wonderful evening. Thank you. Thank you, Sapna.
Thank you so
Ranjeev,
much, Ashok.
Kaustubh.
Thank you so much.
To Asad.